Hello and welcome to a new web development project. In today's project, you will learn how to create this amazing animation using HTML, CSS, and of course, JavaScript. My name is Norbert and I teach web development, so if you enjoy the content, give it a like and become a part of the community by subscribing to the channel. Now, with this being said, let's get started with the project. Okay, so I just have here an empty folder. We're going to get started by creating our index.html file. Hold down Shift, exclamation mark, this will give us our boilerplate. Let's type in here title of text animation, and I'm also going to use Google Fonts to change the font of this. So let me first of all right click, open in live server, because this is the finished project and here's our project, which basically has nothing. So first things first, let me create a h1 with a ID of title and a text of text animation. Now let's go to Google Fonts. So just Google Fonts and within here you should search for actually this is it. I'm searching for Arboreto. Now I'm going to copy in the link. You could also import it using CSS. This time I'm going to copy in the link, paste it above our title, and now actually link up a style sheet. So link, I'm going to link up our style.css file, and let's also create it. So let's go back to our project, style.css, and first things first, I'm just going to add some basic styling to the project. So we don't need our Google fonts anymore. Also going to close up the inspector bar and let's select our body tag. Now let's add the font family of Arboreto and cursive, and there we go. Okay, I'm going to change the background color of the entire body. So let's select our background color. Let's do a hexadecimal color of 222, and let's also add the text color. So the entire text of this will be just a Alice blue. Okay, next up, let's grab onto our ID of title. And we're going to display it as flex, so basically the entire thing, this right here, not the content. But what I wish to do here is actually position it. So I'm going to display it as flex. In order to position it in the center of the page, I'm going to use flex and justify content to the center of the page and align items to the center. And this will, center, and this will center my title. Now, because the title is only yay high, I don't know, 80 pixels or something. Let me inspect it very quick. So as you can see, the title is up here. I want to make it as large as the pages. So for this, I'm going to use a height. Let's change this height to 80 viewport heights. This will make it as large as the pages. Now this will be pushed a bit. Now, if you want to have it dead center down here, you could do 100 pixels. 100 pixels, 100 viewport heights. But because we have a bit of a padding and margin, we need to take it out. So margin 0, you can see it already scrolls down here on the right side. So margin 0, this will make it smaller. And the last we need to take out is the padding. Padding 0, because it has automatic padding added to it. So if I hit save, then this should also be taken out. Now, what you should actually do is cut these two out and go up here and do a general reset. So star and then margin padding 0. As you can see, the scroll bar here just disappeared because also the container, the body itself, had some margin and padding. So if you want to dead center something, this is how you should do it if you're using 100 viewport heights. As you saw, the content keep pushing itself around. Now, okay, so let's move on for this because this is actually not part of the content, but I want to show you this. So, okay, let's move on. We have our 100 viewport heights. Let's also increase the font size of this. So font size, you can play around with this. I'm having a pretty large resolution. This is why I have to increase it to 6 RAM. You could also go higher or lower. And I'm going to add now, actually, you know what? I should add this a bit later on when we have our animation. And what I want to add is a clip path. So as you saw in our finished project, if I hit refresh, you can see it, they're jumping up, but in coming back down to a specific height. And this height is actually higher than its base height. I'm going to show you how you can do this, but actually I'm going to include it a bit later on when we have our animation. Okay, so that's it for now. Now we can go ahead and create our animation keyframe, that is. So let's add to, wait just a second, this is the working project. So I'm going to use here a keyframe. For the identifier, I'm going to just type in here anime, exactly as the cartoons are. Now let's go from 0%, I said, and open quotes curly braces to 100%. Now at 0%, I want my opacity to be 0. And then I want to translate. So transform and then translate on the y-axis 55 pixels. Now, this is from where it starts, but where it ends, the animation should be at 0 pixels and opacity of 1. Hey, I said 1. Why aren't you including 1? Not 10, 1. Now we need to include our animation, and we can do this by adding here animation. And now I'm going to include the name of the animation. So anime. It's going to take 1 second and it's going to have a ease effect. Okay, so as you can see, as soon as I refresh, the animation is taking effect. Now I'm going to comment this out because what I want to do is actually wrap each individual element from the text, so each letter in a element, in a HTML element, and then animate each individual HTML element on its own. Now you could do this manually by wrapping in here each into a div, for example, into a div, and then animating it. But the problem is, if you want to reuse this code, then you would, if I would type in here text or animate, you know what? I'm going to change it to animate dash Norbert. The problem is that you need to wrap now Norbert in each individual. We just changed the text and we should make this automatically work, not typing in here anything else. So I'm going to hit save. It's actually much better. I know which one is which. Hit save, and now let's grab onto the ID, and we need to grab onto the ID in our JavaScript file. So let's create the JavaScript file. Let's call it script.js, and let's also include it in our HTML. So not to wonder later on why this isn't working. So script.js. Don't think that this is a new move. Even I sometimes forget to include the JavaScript file in my HTML file, and then I wonder why the script isn't working. You can debug as much as you want if you forget to include the JavaScript file. Okay, so let's move on to JavaScript for now, at least, because we still need to do a bit of styling here. Now we're actually done within our HTML file, so I'm going to close it up, and I'm just going to select the title, the ID of title, and going here, let's create a variable using the let keyword. Now I'm using let and not const because I am going to change this later on, so I'm going to change the content of this. So let title is equal to, I'm going to go to the document and grab on using querySelector to the ID. You can also use get element by ID, but I love using querySelector. So get onto the ID, grab onto the ID of title. Okay, so let's just console log title really quick. So title, let's go here, open up the console, right click on our project, and we can see we just console log title. Now, what is title? What kind of element is it? What kind of type of JavaScript is this? JavaScript element. Now we can check the type by using the type of operator, and now we will see that this is a object. So what we want here is to grab onto its text. Okay, so we can grab onto its inner HTML, and now if I check the type, it's going to be string. Also, if I would just console log and do another console log here, up here without the type of, I'm going to get Norbert, animate Norbert, instead of, if I would do this title, instead of the H1, instead of the element. So I want to grab onto the content of the element, which is the inner HTML. Okay, I'm going to leave both of these console logs in here. We're going to comment them out. So now that we have our element and we have its content and we know that this is now a string, we can add actually strings to a array. So let's do this by creating a const. We're going to call this array of title. Now the way you can do this, there are actually multiple ways. You could use new array and assign it to this, but I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to destructure title, and actually it's going to be its inner HTML. Now if I would console log array of title, you will see we are going to have a string, and this string will have each letter from the string. We're going to have an array, and this array will transform the string, and as a array item, we're going to have each letter from the string. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. But it's pretty simple. Now, next move that I'm going to do, I'm going to destroy its content. So the title, I'm going to go up here, title.innerText. I'm going to assign this to an empty string. I'm going to make it disappear. Now, as you can see here, we're still console logging array of title. This means that the title was grabbed on from the DOM, and it was added here in a string, and down here the title's inner text was then destroyed by assigning it, changing it actually to an empty string. But we still have access to the array of title. Okay, so this was not changed. So what we can do now, or what we need to do now, is wrap each of these elements into a div. So we can then add classes to them and then animate them one after another. Now the way we can do this, because this is now an array, we're going to use a for each loop. So I'm going to go down here and use a for each, because remember, now this is an array. I can now target each element from this array. So for each element from this array, or characters, I'm going to use char, and I'm going to also get its index. Now, the reason I'm getting their index, and this should be actually in a callback function, the reason I'm going to get their indexes is because I want to use their indexes in order to create a delay effect. I'm going to show you this just in a couple of seconds. Now we're going to use the arrow function, and let's first of all create a div. So I'm going to create a const div, I'm going to call it div, and this is going to be created using document create element. So basically I'm just naming this variable as a div, okay? I'm not creating it here, I'm actually creating it by going onto the document and creating the element of div, okay? If I want to create a span, I have to type in here span. Now let's actually console log div, so this variable. You can see I just created for each numbers of characters in this array the equal number of divs. Now these divs are these divs, this sounds so stupid. These elements, the name of div, content division element, that's it. Each of this content division element has absolutely nothing in it. So what I'm going to do now is also assign an attribute to this div. So this div will have a style attribute of animation delay. I'm going to set it to 0.5 plus the index. You know what? I'm just going to quickly console log here, the console log the index. We'll see. I'm going to have, so first of all, I console log the index, and then I'm console logging the div. This means it's going to console log one index and one div. This is why you see 0 is a, and one div created 1, one div created 2, one div created not. These indexes actually are for n, for each element. If I would now console log index and select the 0, you get the undefined, I should see a somewhere. I'm not seeing a, no problem. I think you get the point here. Okay, so I'm going to leave both of this in. I'm going to actually move this up here. So we're going to have our index plus 0.5. Until now, it's nothing, but now I'm going to add 10. So I'm going to divide this by 10, and then I'm going to add the string of seconds, or s. Because when you define here an animation delay, you need to add seconds. And I'm actually adding here 0.5 plus the index. For example, 0 would be the very first index, plus 0.5. This would result in a 0.5. Divided by 10 is going to result in a 0.05. And then seconds, because I need milliseconds actually. Okay. So now we have our divs. We don't see anything in here. We can now actually assign to each of these divs. You can see that divs are empty, but they do have a style of animation delay a 0.6 seconds. So now we can assign each character, so a for example, to each div. And we can do this by going down here and saying div.innerText should be equal to the character, so char. Okay, and now you can see we have here n and t, and actually let's go up here, animation. Okay, so we're done with this part. Each element of the string has now a div wrapped around it, and it also has a animation delay effect added to it. Next up is to create a class of animation. So we're going to go back to our CSS, and we also create it down here, and let's create a anime-element. Okay, now first things first, I'm going to add a text shadow to it, so sad that you can't see anything right now. So text shadow, I'm going to go here with a 15 pixels, 22 pixels, 11 pixels. It's going to be all around it, but it's going to be displaced a bit. And an RGBA of 110 for the reds, 110 for the greens, and 110 for the blue, and a 0.2 opacity or alpha. Okay, now I'm going to change the opacity of this to 0, and I'm going to also add a transform translate of 50 pixels. Actually, we can decrease this to 10 later on. Now, I'm going to add the same anime, so the same effect here, but down here. I'm going to comment this out. Now, for the moment, we can't see anything. And I'm also going to comment out the opacity. What we need to do now is add to each div the class, well, the class of animate the characters. But first things first, let's actually add those divs in here, in our DOM. And it's pretty simple. You do remember that we have our title here, and we clear this inner text. Now, if I grab on here to the title, and now I can append the child element of div. And there we go. There's our text. Now, in order for the animation to take effect, as I said, each of these divs should now have a class of animate element. And this is pretty simple. We're just going to grab onto the div. I'm going to add a class name to it. And the class name will be, of course, anime-element. Element. There we go. Okay. And as you can already see, it animates in. Now, the animation should start from blank, so from 0. So we shouldn't see anything. This is why we have this opacity of 0. Now, if I comment this back in and hit save, you can see it animates in from opacity 0, but it also disappears. So in order to add the opacity, you can see here opacity 0, opacity 1. This is only the animation. But the class now, the element itself has a opacity of 0. After the animation is concluded, it's going to return to the opacity of 0. Now, the way we can remove this opacity of 0 is by adding a opacity of 1, of course. And for this, we're going to use a set timeout callback function, a set timeout function here. So I'm going to use set timeout, and after the animation has ended, use here callback function. After the animation has ended, we're going to take that div and we're going to change its style to the opacity equal to 1. Okay, now this should take effect roughly after the animation ended. So I'm going to use 1600 milliseconds here because our initial animation, wait just a second, it's taking 1500. Wait. This should be 1.5. Yeah. And there we go. Now, so two things. Let's hit the refresh. You can see it comes in from opacity 0. If I would comment out this, then it's also going to remain at opacity 0. You can see each of them disappears. But after the animation has ended, so after 1600 seconds, the opacity 1 will be applied again. Okay, so I hope this makes sense to you. Now we're almost done here. The last thing I want to add is that hover effect. You see here, if I hover over the text, it gives it a animation. Actually, there are two effects here. One is a hover effect, and one is a on-mouse over effect. Okay, so let me show you how we can do this. First things first, we're going to go to our CSS and grab onto our animation element, and let's add here a hover effect. The hover effect will be as following. I'm going to set a cursor to pointer, and I'm going to change the color to, let's say, RGB of some kind of silver color, so 96, 93, and 93. Okay, so this is basically darker, silver, darker color. So if I hover over one of the letters, this is what happens. Now I also want to take out the shadow. You can see down here the shadow, so we can also do a text. Wait just a second. Not text alignment. You can also do a text shadow, and we're going to set this to none. So if I hover over one of the elements, it's not going to have any kind of shadow. You can see it removes the shadow. Okay, now let's move back to JavaScript, because what we need to do now is to remove this animation element, or actually this class, because this is the class that actually triggers the animation. So if I would remove the animation from E, on this one, I can actually remove it here. It's in our console. Now let's go to the element selector. Let's select which one, and select A. Okay, if I would remove here the text, actually I can't remove it here. You know what? I need to make this larger and this smaller. Okay, we are here at A. If I would remove the animation, you see it moves up here, and if I would add it back in, then it starts. So how can we add and remove this animation? Well, we're going to create a function. This function will be, actually we need to grab onto each element individually. We have here our loop, and we have access to each element. Now you need to do this before you're appending the child. So we're going to grab onto the div. We're going to add a event listener. You can either type in add event listener. I prefer to do it the React way of on mouse over. I'm going to assign it to a arrow function. On mouse over is going to do the following thing. It's going to do it's going to add dash remove the class of anime dash element. Okay, now this needs to be toggled. We're going to create here a reusable function. So we're going to create here a function, going to call it toggle animation. Now this function is going to take in two variables, two arguments. One will be the element, and so the element is going to be toggled, and one will be the element's class that will be toggled. So the element dot class list dot remove, because first things first, I'm going to remove the element's class list. I'm going to pass in here the element's class list, and then after just a couple of seconds, I'm going to use here set timeout function again. I'm going to grab onto the element again and dot class list and dot add the element's class. So the element class that I'm going to pass in here, and this should take only 0.5 milliseconds. So take a look at the elements, and actually I need to apply the function here. So let's add the function, the toggle animation, and now we need to pass in two variables. First will be the element that will be targeted. This will be the div, and then the class that will be targeted, and this will be the string of anime dash element. Okay, so as soon as I will enter with my mouse one of these characters, take a look at its class. Okay, you see adding and removing the class. Now the last thing I want to add here, for this to have that smooth animation, is, let me go back to our CSS. So add a clip path. Now the clip path, so let's type in clip path. You could use polygon, you can use margin box. I'm going to use actually polygon. I'm going to go with 20%, 0%. Now remember, this is a polygon. It's going to go here, 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 and here. And it's actually having this triangle cut out. Also, you can see here in our finished project, if I'm doing, you can see how this actually disappears in this direction. This is because it is in a polygon. Okay, now 80% and 0% again, then 100% and 100% again, and then it's going to go from 0% to 100% again. Okay, so now if I hover over my elements, you can see how they jump around, but they are in a polygon now. Okay, I just want to change a couple of things here. Is this should be only 10. Okay, you see how smoothly it comes back down. So that's basically it for our project. Let me actually make this larger, and let me zoom in a bit. You can see if I hover over them. So if I do a complete hover, then the animation would, well, start again, because each of the elements has that animation element to it, that animation class. If I refresh the page, and the entire animation will start from the start. If I hover only over one element, then it's going to have, then only that element is going to have that animation. Okay, so I think this is a pretty cool project. So if you enjoyed it, then give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, click that notification bell in order to get notified whenever I post new videos. And with this being said, catch you on the flip side. Bye bye.